In Unit 7, we're going to look at extending what we know about exponential relationships and see how we can come up with formulas that will help with financial applications. So there's a lot of real-world applications to do with money, of course, that we're going to be able to look at. So we're going to start with what's called simple interest and then move on from there in future lessons. Simple interest is interest that's calculated only on the original principal using the simple interest formula given as I equals PRT. So we have to define a few different terms here. So what does it mean by the original principal? That would be a good thing to start with. Well, principal is the amount of money that you put in a bank. So let's to keep things simple, let's think about it in terms of a bank account. But this applies to any kind of investment. So you've got $100 from your grandma for your birthday, and you run down to your bank because, of course, you want to save it. You don't want to spend it on anything foolish, and you put it in the bank. Well, that $100 you put in the bank is called principal. It's the amount that you're investing, okay? That's what we mean by principal. So in the formula, I equals PRT, I is the interest. That's not even mentioned here, but let's get that one in there as well. So interest in dollars, use that for short. So principal is the amount invested. Also in dollars. R is the rate. Whoops. So that's the interest rate. Let's blow this up a little. Interest rate. And that's always given. Usually we talk about interest rates like 5%, 6%, whatever, but we always change it for the calculations as a decimal, that is. So we change percents to decimal. And that's important. So let's underline that. And T is time. That's what the T stands for. And that's given in years. And then we have final amount. Final amount is the interest added to the principal. That's literally what this formula stands for. So A is final amount. And if we look back at the formula I've highlighted, A equals P plus I. Remember, P is the principal, so that's the $100 we took to the bank. And let's say we put it in the bank and saved it for 5 years and it got, I don't know, $20 interest. Then the 100 we brought there plus the $20 interest is $120. That's our final amount. That's what A is. So that's a really simple formula. So again, P is principal and I is interest. These are both in dollars. So one thing that we got to be clear on to avoid confusion is when we talk about interest in this case, it's the interest amount. AMT, I'm just writing it short for amount. So that's a dollar amount. We don't want to confuse that with the interest rate, which is represented by R here, because that's the percent that it's earning, okay? So, because we can talk about interest and mean two different things. You could say, oh, it gets 5% interest, or you could say, oh, it earned $20 interest. So R is the rate, I is the dollar amount. So show the interest rates as they would appear in the formula as R. So this is simply changing percents to decimals. And I'm not sure why there's a box around 13%. I think that's just a mistake. But as you know, hopefully, to change from a percent to a decimal, we just divide by 100. Or a shortcut way is to move the decimal place 2 spaces to the right. Remember, if there's no decimal shown, then we just assume there's a decimal at the end of the number. So either way, dividing by 100 or moving the implied decimal 2 to the right, we get 0.13. I'm going to throw a 0 in front. If I move the decimal 2 to the right here, then I'm going to have it's going to go here, but if I just put it in front of the 2, that's only moving it 1 to the right. So I have to add a 0 and stick that in front. So 2.5% is 0.025. So again, pay attention. Use your calculator if that's easiest. Just go 2.5 divided by 100. And you can't really go wrong, but otherwise you can just move it over a little bit. All right, 0.05%. Again, use your calculator if necessary, but if you want to move it 2 places to the right, it's 0.005. So we can have decimal percents, but we want to still change it out of a percent. We don't want to use it as a percent in the formula. Also, when you'll notice that when I said that t was time, I also said it was in years. So if we're given something that's in a different unit, such as months, weeks, days, we have to convert it. So just remember this. 1 year is equal to 12 months, and it's also equal to 52 weeks in a year, and 365 days. So that's a conversion factor that we can use to convert from these different units. So if something's given as 24 months, again, I want this to be in years, so I'm going to need to divide that by 12 months per year, and that equals 2 years. 8 months, again, still divide by 12. Anytime I see the word months, I'm going to divide by 12. In fact, let's do a little highlighting. So if I see the word months, I divide by 12. And so that equals 0.6. Repeating, I'll call it 0.67. This next one I see is in weeks. So I'm going to have to divide that by 52. So 14 divided by 52 is, of course, going to give me a decimal. And I should carry a few decimal places. It works out to 0.269. So in other words, it's about 0.27 years. 14 weeks is a little bit more than a quarter of a year. And then for days, there's 365 days in a year, so I'm going to divide that 82 by 365 to find out how many years that is. And again, it's less than a year, but we need to have the specific amount, so 0.225. In order to make things a little easier the formula a little easier to remember it was I equals PRT, which is not a super hard formula to remember, but this triangle helps us even more. So basically the idea is if I want to find out what I is, then I am going to multiply it by PRT. And if I want to solve for some other value, then I can cover up the part I'm looking for and then multiply, divide as necessary. I know that's vague. When I do an example, it should, I hope, become clear. But again, here's what these different things stand for. So interest, dollars, principal, dollars, that's the units, rate, decimal, so not as a percent, time, years. Not writing very neatly today. All right, so there's there it is. So let's just look at a few examples. So the first one, calculate how much interest is earned if $2,000 is invested at 4% simple interest for 26 weeks. Well, I did a little highlighting back. No, I guess I didn't. Not what I was thinking. All right, well, here's the different things. Let's start highlighting it here. I'm going to go I equals PRT again. That's the go-to formula. Let's highlight here. I for yellow, green for P, blue for R, and orange for T. All right, so calculate how much interest is earned. So in other words, they're asking us to find I. If $2,000 is invested, well, that's just our P value. That's what they're putting in there. 4% simple interest. So that has to do with the rate. It's not the actual rate. It's telling us that R is equal to 0.04. And then for 26 weeks, that has to do with the time. So that means I'll divide that by 52 weeks in a year, and I'll get T is equal to 0.5 from that. So I've got all these different values, and I equals PRT then tells me that if I take 2,000 and multiply, remember if you just write things beside each other with brackets, it means multiply. If I do 2,000 times 0.04 times 0.5, that's going to be my I value. And that works out to be 40. What are the units? Dollars, because I is always in dollars. So if you invest $2,000 for half a year at 4% interest, you'll get $40. How much is the investment worth? What they're really asking you to do is find A. And remember, A is simply P plus I, which we saw above was 2,000 for P and 40 for I, so the final amount, the investment's worth $2,040. You could go to the bank and say, give me all my money, and they would give you $2,040. What principal is needed to have $500 interest in 2 years invested at 2.5% simple interest? So the first question we just did, example 3, was just straightforward using I equals PRT. Examples 4, 5, and 6 are all just rearranging the formula. Okay, so they're variations. First thing that's bugging me here is the word principal has been spelt wrong. Should be principal. I am pretty sure. Anyway, so what principal is needed? So in this case, they're asking me to find P. They're giving me I. They're telling me how much interest is earned. They're telling me how long it's been invested for. And again, they're giving me the rate, which I still have to change to 0.025. I have to divide it by 100. But this is where the simple interest triangle comes into play. I'm just going to redraw it rather than refer back to the previous page. Okay, so it was like this. It had I on top, and then it had PRT underneath. And so we can just use the formula the way it is. We could rearrange I equals PRT formula, or if I want to find principal, they're asking me to find the principal, right? So they're asking me to find this one. So if I take what's left and make it into an equation, look at the way the triangle looks. I'll rewrite the word P, and what I've got here is I on top of RT. Once again, I've got the I on top, and I've got RT on the bottom. That's telling me how I can rewrite this formula. I on top over RT, which basically means I divided by R times T. And I could just go around and rearrange I equals PRT formula the long way, but this is a shortcut visual way to help me see how to do it. So this isolates P for me. I want to get P, and so now I'll just go, just don't have a lot of room here, 500 divided by R, which was 0.025, times T, which was 2. I just have to make sure I follow order of operations. So what I really ought to do is figure out what's on the denominator first and then divide it. So keep the 500 on top. 2 times 0.025 just becomes 0.05. So 500 divided by 0.05 is 10,000. So you need to have $10,000 principal. You have to put $10,000 into your investment, and if you do, you'll get $500 interest if the interest rate was 2.5%. what rate of interest is needed to get 7,000 to grow to 10,000 in 5 years? Okay, so this time they're asking me to find out what R is. And they're giving me a principal of 7,000, and they're giving me a time of 5,000. There's a little trick twisted into this one, though. The 10,000, the only thing that's missing here is the interest, but 10,000 is not interest. 10,000 is the final amount, okay? This is really A that they're giving me here. And remember, A equals P plus I. So what I want for my formula is I need to know what I is. If I rearrange this formula, or even if I don't rearrange it, let's just plug numbers in. So the final amount was 10,000, and the principal was 7,000. Hopefully you can look at that and go, well, obviously the interest has to be 3,000. That's the difference between the 10,000 and the 7,000. But if I want to rearrange it, then yes, I can subtract. I can show it by subtracting 7,000 from each side, and I get I equals 3,000. So I do have to be a bit careful about that one. But again, I can use the simple interest triangle to help me remember the formula. Let's just draw it out again just to make things a little easier. I over PRT. This time I'm asked to find R, which means to find R, again, just using this as a visual, R is going to equal the I that's on top and then P and T on the bottom. So I ignore whatever I'm trying to find. I've already taken care of the R. So it's I over PT. So I over PT. And so we said that I was $3,000, P was $7,000, and T was 5. So again, you need to do the bottom first. You get 3,000 divided by 35,000. And that works out to be, let's see, 0.086. And that's as a decimal. If you want to convert it back to a percent, then you could move that decimal 2 places to the right, and you get 8.6% interest. But you don't have to do that. Before I move on to the last example, just compare this formula here that we just got with this one here. They're almost the exact same, aren't they? It's just the first one, the one in example 4, has got P by itself, whereas the one in example 5 has got the R by itself, but in both cases we've got I on the top and the other two variables on the bottom. That's always the case when we're solving for anything that isn't I. When we're solving for I, it's just I equals PRT. For anything else, I is going to be divided by the two other variables. All right, last example. How long will it take for $1,500, $1,500 is our principal, to grow to $2,000? Again, that is our A value. That's the final amount. So to grow from 1,500 to 2,000, how much interest must have been earned? Well, it's the difference between them. I assume everyone would agree that I has to be $500. Take the initial 1,500, add 500 to it. That's how we get the $2,000. At a simple interest rate of 3%, again, that's telling us that R is 0.03. So what are we being asked to find? How long? We're being asked to find T, aren't we? So if we're being asked to find T, the formula becomes T equals I over PR. We said that I was 500, P is 1,500, R was 0.03. Work out the bottom first. So it's 500 over 45 when I multiply 1500 times 0.03, and that works out to be 11.1 years. So it's really the same formula. It's that I equals PRT formula over and over again, simply just rearranged using that triangle each time.